The kitchen smelled like roasted turkey and fading warmth, the kind of scent that belonged to childhood before everything went wrong. My mother was humming softly, her pearl necklace catching the glow of the overhead light as she basted the turkey one last time. It was my father's 70th birthday, and I had come home mostly out of duty, not affection. The air was thick with politeness, the kind of quiet that hides years of avoidance. I was stirring gravy when the front door slammed so hard the walls trembled. Did the golden nurse finally show up? Ryan's voice carried that lazy drawl of intoxication. My stomach clenched. He stumbled into the kitchen, tie-loose face flushed with whiskey. "Nurse Emily," he mocked, "saving everyone but your own family." I set down the spoon. "You're drunk. Please, Ryan, sit down." He laughed, the sound sharp mean. "Sit. Oh, she gives orders now. You think that ER job makes you someone." My father cleared his throat but said nothing. My mother looked down, her hands moving nervously over the napkins. "Ryan, stop," I said quietly. He grabbed a glass, filled it with more whiskey, and lifted it in mock salute. "Here's to Little Miss Perfect." Then he slammed it down. The glass shattered across the counter fragments, skittering toward me. One piece sliced my palm. I bent to pick it up, blood smearing the white tile. When I stood, his eyes locked on mine. The room went still. Even the jazz record in the living room had stopped. His voice dropped low. "Go ahead, fix this too, nurse." I could feel the heat of his anger radiating the tension, pulling the air taut. My father remained seated, frozen in the old silence of a man who believed control was better than confrontation. My mother whispered, "Emily, let it go." But I couldn't. Not this time. I stood taller, meeting his stare. "You need to leave Ryan." The laughter died in his throat. He took one deliberate step forward, then another. His eyes were wild now. "You think you're better than me because you work nights cleaning up strangers' blood." His hand twitched, fist curling. "Ryan, don't," I said, my voice trembling. He didn't listen. The punch landed hard against my cheek, a flash of white and pain exploding behind my eyes. I tasted blood. My body hit the counter, then the floor. "Stop it!" my mother screamed, but she didn't move. My father's voice was calm, frighteningly calm. "That's enough." But Ryan wasn't finished. He grabbed my shoulder and shoved. I heard a sickening pop, dislocated. The pain was electric. I cried out, clutching my arm. My vision blurred. The birthday cake slid off the table, smashing beside me. Frosting blood and shards of glass mixed on the floor. Ryan stood above me, breathing hard. "You always make me the villain," he spat. My father stepped forward, took the bottle from his hand, and said quietly, "Go outside. Cool off." Ryan obeyed. That was what he always did, hurt then leave. My mother crouched halfway down, holding a towel, but not touching me. "Don't call anyone," she said. "Let's not ruin your father's night." I stared at her, disbelief heavier than the pain. My face throbbed. Blood ran warm down my neck. "He hit me," I whispered. My father's voice came from behind her. "Emily, this is family. We don't bring police into family." The absurdity of it made something inside me go still. I watched them tidy up the room, my mother gathering glass, my father straightening the tablecloth like they could clean away violence with order. I tried to sit, but pain shot through my shoulder like lightning. The walls tilted. My breath came shallow. My mother's voice faded into the hum of the refrigerator. The world dimmed, and the last thing I saw was the flicker of birthday candles still burning beside a streak of red. When I woke, the air smelled of antiseptic. A fluorescent light buzzed above me. My face felt heavy, swollen. The steady beep of a heart monitor kept time with my pulse. I turned slightly, recognizing the sterile curtains of the ER, my own workplace, the place I had always felt safe. Now I was the patient. My parents entered quietly. My mother's hands clutched her purse. My father looked anywhere but at me. "Ryan feels terrible," he said. I stared. My voice cracked. He broke my shoulder. My mother reached for my hand. "Sweetheart, let's not make this bigger than it is. You should have known when to stop. When to stop what I whispered." My father sighed. "You should have stayed quiet." The monitor beeped faster as tears blurred my vision. That was the moment I realized something in me had broken deeper than bone. People say childhood shapes everything, but in our house it decided everything. From the beginning, Ryan was the golden child, the sun my parents orbited around, and I was the quiet one trying not to burn. My father, a retired Navy officer, believed discipline was love. My mother, once a literature teacher, believed silence was peace. Together, they raised us in a home where appearances mattered more than truth. Ryan learned early that charm and noise earned rewards. I learned that being good meant disappearing. When Ryan scraped his knee, Dad lifted him high and called him a soldier. When I got straight A's, Dad said, "Don't brag." I used to think that was fairness. It took me years to see it was favoritism disguised as humility. Ryan could do no wrong. Even when he quit college after a semester, my father said, "He's finding his path." When I told them I had been accepted into nursing school with a scholarship, Dad only asked who would take care of Ryan's car while he looked for work. Mom cooked his favorite meals when he was stressed. They let him sleep late, skip responsibilities, and still called him our boy. I remember one summer night when I was 16. Ryan had been caught shoplifting beer. I heard Dad on the phone pulling strings with an old Navy friend in the sheriff's office. After he hung up, he told me family protects family. That's how it works. I never forgot those words, even when I wished I could. Years later, when Ryan joined the fire department, they acted like he'd saved the world. He lasted 8 months before drinking on duty got him suspended. Mom cried for days, calling the station chief unfair. Dad said, "A real man stumbles before he walks." When I graduated nursing school, only Mom came to the ceremony. Dad said he was too tired. Ryan didn't even call. Still, I sent him pictures trying to include him. The text he sent back was just 3 words. "Must be nice." By the time I started working in the ER, I understood my role in the family, the fixer. I handled their bills when Dad forgot, helped Mom with her appointments, and bailed Ryan out when his credit card was frozen. I told myself I was helping, that maybe one day they would see me. They never did. Ryan's drinking got worse. He borrowed money from me twice, promising to pay it back after the next paycheck. It never came. I kept covering for him because every time I tried to say no, Mom would call crying. "He's struggling, Emily. You know he's not like you." She meant disciplined, responsible, sober. What she never said was that enabling him made her feel needed, and silence kept her safe. The first real fracture between Ryan and me happened 5 years ago at Thanksgiving. He came drunk again, shouting at me for bringing store-bought pie. When I told him to stop embarrassing Mom, he shoved a chair across the floor and stormed out. I thought that was the worst it could get. I was wrong. After that night, I tried to distance myself. I worked long hours, avoided Sunday dinners. Every time I missed one, Dad left voicemails. "You're still family, Emily. Don't act like a stranger." That line always had an edge of warning, as if love came with conditions. I spent Christmas alone that year, charting patience and watching the snowfall outside the hospital window. It was peaceful in a lonely kind of way. I started saving for a down payment on a condo building, a life that didn't depend on anyone else's approval. Meanwhile, Ryan bounced from job to job, his temper flaring whenever reality hit. He blamed everyone, his boss, his wife, who left him the economy, but never himself. I stopped answering his calls. When Mom begged me to forgive your brother, he's just lost, I told her forgiveness requires change. She didn't understand. In her world, silence was virtue. In mine, silence had become survival. Looking back, I can trace every moment that led to that night in the kitchen. Every bruise began with a boundary crossed years earlier. Every apology I swallowed became permission. And every time I stayed quiet, Ryan learned that power came from volume, and I learned that safety came from endurance. It wasn't true. Neither of us was safe. The golden child had turned hollow, and the obedient daughter had turned invisible. The night of my father's birthday wasn't an accident. It was the inevitable end of a story that had been writing itself for decades. A week before my father's birthday, I was finishing a double shift at Portland General when I saw Ryan waiting in the hospital parking lot. His truck was parked, crooked engine running headlights cutting through the mist. The sight of him there made my chest tighten. He waved like nothing was wrong, that same lazy grin he used to wear when he wanted something. I walked up slowly, the cold air biting my skin. "What are you doing here, Ryan?" I asked, adjusting my coat. "Couldn't call first." He leaned against his truck. "You never answer when I call." His voice was smooth, almost cheerful. That fake warmth he used when he was about to ask for a favor. "I was in the area. Thought we could talk." I sighed. "You need money." He chuckled. "Damn, you still read me like a book." He took a folded piece of paper from his pocket and waved it. "It's nothing big. I just need $5,000 to clear something up. Gambling debts, nothing crazy. I'll pay you back in a month." I stared at him. "A month? You don't even have a job right now." His smile faltered. "I'm between gigs, Em. You know how it is." I crossed my arms. "No, I don't. I pay my bills. I don't ask people to bail me out." His expression shifted fast, the charm sliding away. "You really think you're better than me, huh?" he said, voice hardening. "You always did." I shook my head. "I think you need help. Real help, not a handout." He stepped closer, invading my space. "Help? You want to play therapist now?" His breath smelled like beer and bitterness. "You could fix this for me in one transfer. You make good money, don't you?" "I'm saving for grad school," I said evenly. "You need to deal with your mess yourself." He laughed harshly. "You talk like Mom and Dad don't still see me as the man of the family." "They'd be disgusted if they knew how cold you are." I turned away. "Then tell them. Maybe they'll finally stop pretending I'm the problem." He didn't answer. Instead, he spit on the ground near my shoe and said, "You'll regret this." Then he climbed back into his truck and drove off, tires screeching across the lot. I stood there shaking not from fear, but from the familiar ache of anger. That night, I told myself I was done covering for him. But in families like ours, being done never really means done. The next morning, I was charting patient notes when my phone buzzed. It was my father. I hesitated before answering. "Dad Ryan told me you turned him down," he said without greeting. "You know he's been under pressure." "He's been under pressure for years," I replied. "That doesn't give him the right to keep using everyone." My father's voice hardened. "He's your brother. We take care of family." "Do you want him to end up in trouble with the wrong people?" "He already is," I said. "I can't fix that." There was a pause, then the line went cold. Later that night, my mother called, her tone hesitant. "Your father's upset. Ryan's been struggling." "Please, Em, just lend him the money. You have savings." "That's my future mom, not his bailout fund." Silence, then a sigh heavy enough to fill the room. "I wish you weren't so cold." She hung up. The words stung more than I wanted to admit. The next few days, I avoided their calls. At work, I smiled for patients and charted trauma cases while pretending my own family wasn't one. But at night, I couldn't sleep. I kept hearing my father's voice, the same sentence he'd used my whole life. Family protects family. It sounded noble once. Now it felt like a chain. On Friday, during my lunch break, I heard laughter near the reception desk. Ryan was there again, leaning on the counter like he owned the place. My colleagues looked uncomfortable. "Hey, sis," he called, flashing a grin. "You ignoring your big brother." My coworkers exchanged glances. "What are you doing here?" I hissed, pulling him aside. "This is my job." He shrugged. "Just wanted to remind you whose family." "You embarrassed me in front of Mom and Dad. Thought we could fix it." "There's nothing to fix. Come on, Em. You know you'll cave eventually." "You always do." His tone was a mix of threat and confidence. "Don't make me go to Dad again. Do what you want," I said, walking away. But as I reached the door, he called out, "People like you end up alone. You know that I didn't turn around?" That night when I got home, my father's car was parked outside my apartment building. He was waiting in the lobby, hands clasped behind his back like a man about to deliver orders. "Dad, what are you doing here?" "We need to talk," he said. His eyes were tired but stern. "Ryan told me what you said. He's hurt." I felt my patience crack. "He's hurt. He shows up drunk, threatens me, and somehow I'm the bad guy." My father's jaw tightened. "He's your brother. He's family." "So am I." My voice shook. But that never seems to matter. He looked at me for a long time, disappointment shadowing his features. You've changed, Emily. He turned to leave. Sometimes I wonder where we went wrong with you. The door closed softly behind him, but the sound felt final. I stood there for a long time, staring at the empty lobby. In that moment, I realized something brutal and clear. My family didn't want peace. They wanted compliance, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to give it. The night of my father's birthday arrived with a drizzle that coated the streets in a thin, silver sheen. I almost turned back twice while driving there. The windshield wipers moved like a metronome, keeping time for dread. The Blake family house stood at the end of the cul-de-sac, its windows glowing warmly against the cold. From the outside, it looked like peace. Inside, I knew better. I carried a homemade chocolate cake and a card that said, "70 looks good on you, Dad." It felt dishonest, but it was the kind of lie our family was built on. Mom opened the door, cheeks flushed from the oven heat and wine. "You made it," she said with forced cheer. "Your father's friends are already here." The living room smelled like bourbon and roast beef. Laughter floated through the air, thick with nostalgia and denial. I smiled politely, setting the cake on the counter. "Where's Ryan?" I asked. "Running late," Mom said, eyes darting away. "He promised he'd behave tonight." Those words landed heavy. Behave in our family meant don't explode in public. I helped arrange the dinner table while guests mingled, my father glowing in the center of attention. He looked older, smaller than I remembered, but his voice carried the same authority that had ruled our home for decades. He spotted me and smiled. "Emily, you didn't have to drive all the way from Portland." "I wanted to be here," I said softly. It was half true. Part of me wanted to witness whether peace was possible. The other part wanted to confirm that it never had been. When Ryan finally arrived, it was nearly an hour late. The room shifted. Conversations paused for a heartbeat, then resumed, pretending not to notice the smell of whiskey that entered with him. He wore a wrinkled dress shirt and that familiar swagger that always made people forgive him too easily. "Sorry I'm late," he announced, voice too loud. "Traffic was murder." He kissed Mom on the cheek and clapped Dad on the back like a hero returning from war. I braced myself. Dinner began quietly enough. Ryan told stories that made the guests laugh, most of them half true. Mom beamed, relieved. I stayed silent, cutting turkey and passing plates. When he reached for more wine, Dad poured it without a word. The rhythm of old patterns felt suffocating. Then Ryan looked across the table at me. "So, Em, how's life saving strangers?" "Still too busy to call your brother." His grin was sharp. I smiled thinly. "Some of us have shifts to cover." He leaned back. "Right, because you're the responsible one." "Everyone knows that." "Ryan." Mom warned under her breath. He ignored her. "Tell everyone about that promotion you bragged about." "I never bragged," I said. "I just mentioned it." He laughed. "Of course. Humble little Emily. Always perfect, always judging." The air thinned. Dad cleared his throat. "Ryan, enough." "No, let him talk," I said quietly. "He's just getting started." Ryan's eyes lit up like a match. "Oh, you want me to be honest?" "Fine. You think you're better than this family. You walk around like you're the only one who worked for something." "You're drunk," I said. "Sit down. Don't tell me what to do." He slammed his hand on the table, rattling the dishes. One guest coughed awkwardly. The clock ticked loudly above the fireplace. Mom stood up, hands trembling. "Please, Ryan, not tonight." "Why not?" he snapped. "She's been embarrassing me for years, telling people I'm a mess. You think I don't hear what you say?" My heartbeat drummed in my ears. "I haven't said anything that isn't true." His chair scraped back hard. "You see, there it is. The princess always gets the last word." He stumbled toward the kitchen, grabbing another glass. Dad followed, muttering his name. I stayed seated, my whole body tense. Through the doorway, I could see Ryan pouring more whiskey, his hand unsteady. The guests pretended not to notice, retreating into low conversation. I stood and walked to the kitchen, quietly placing my hand over the bottle. "Enough," I said. He looked at me, eyes glassy. "You think you can stop me? I'm trying to stop you from humiliating yourself," I said. "And this family." He smiled without humor. This family doesn't need your saving. I could feel every muscle in my body tightening. Then prove it. Leave before you do something you can't take back. The silence between us was thick. Then Dad's voice came tired but stern. Emily, don't provoke him. The words cut deeper than I expected. Ryan laughed, shaking his head. See, even Dad knows. You always make it worse. He lifted the glass to his lips, staring at me over the rim. The look in his eyes was pure resentment. You really should learn when to stop. The clock struck 9. Thunder rolled outside. And in that charged moment, I understood this wasn't just another family argument. It was a fuse burning slow towards something that could no longer be stopped. It happened so fast I almost didn't see it coming, though in truth I had felt it building all evening, a storm gathering behind Ryan's eyes. The air in the kitchen was thick, the smell of whiskey and gravy swirling together. My mother hovered by the sink, pretending to rinse dishes that didn't need cleaning. My father stood rigid near the counter, jaw clenched, torn between control and cowardice. Ryan set his glass down, the sound sharp like a gunshot. You think you're better than me, don't you? He said, voice low, trembling with anger. I took a slow breath. I think you're drunk and should go home. He smirked. Always the nurse. Always diagnosing, fixing, managing. You've been trying to control me since we were kids. No, I said, feeling my pulse climb. I've been trying to survive you. His eyes narrowed, dark and wild. Say that again. You heard me. I said softer now, almost a whisper. He took one step closer, then another. My father raised a hand slightly as if to stop him, but froze halfway. Mom's voice quivered. Ryan, please. He ignored her. You think you can talk to me like that in my own house? He said, even though it wasn't his house. His breath hit my cheek, hot with liquor. You walk in here like some saint judging us. I moved back until my hip hit the counter. Stop this, I said. This isn't worth it. It's worth everything, he hissed. Then he grabbed the wine glass beside him and hurled it across the room. It shattered against the cabinet, spraying shards and red wine across the white tile. My mother gasped. Ryan, she cried. But he wasn't listening. He slammed his fist down on the table, making the plates jump. You think you can look down on me? His voice rose to a roar. You don't know what I've been through because you never take responsibility. I shot back my own anger, breaking free. That was the spark. His hand came fast, a blur. The slap caught my cheek, knocking my head sideways. I staggered, pain blooming across my face. I heard my mother scream again, but still she didn't move. My father shouted, "That's enough," but didn't step forward. I straightened slowly, tasting blood, the metallic tang mixing with adrenaline. You're pathetic, I said, before I could stop myself. His face twisted red and wild. He lunged. His hand hit my shoulder, pushing me hard against the counter. The sharp corner slammed into my arm. There was a pop, a scream I didn't recognize as mine. My right shoulder went dead, the pain white hot. Ryan, my mother yelled, but it was too late. His fist came next, connecting with my face. The world blurred. I felt myself falling, the room spinning, glass crunching beneath me as I hit the floor. I could see my father frozen, his hand halfway raised but unmoving like a statue. My mother sobbed, covering her mouth with her towel. Don't call anyone, Dad muttered, voice low but firm. We'll handle this. The absurdity of it echoed in my ears. I was lying on the floor, bleeding, my brother panting above me, and all they cared about was reputation. Ryan stood over me, chest heaving, his face twisted in triumph and regret all at once. You always had to win, he said, voice breaking. Now look at you. His words slurred, as if even he couldn't believe what he'd done. I tried to move, but pain ripped through my shoulder like fire. I could barely breathe. He threw the glass bottle against the wall where it exploded into fragments. This is your fault, he shouted. You pushed me. Ryan, stop, Mom cried, but her voice sounded small, useless. Go upstairs, Dad ordered. Now. Ryan stared down at me one last time, his eyes empty, then stormed out of the kitchen, his footsteps heavy on the stairs. The silence afterward was unbearable. I lay there in the wreckage trying to focus on something, anything. The clock on the wall ticked steady and cruel. The birthday cake had fallen from the counter, frosting smeared across the floor, candles still burning beside streaks of red. My father knelt briefly not beside me, but near the spilled wine. "Emily," he said softly, "don't call the police." He didn't mean it. My vision blurred. "He broke my shoulder," I whispered. "He didn't mean it," he repeated as if saying it could make it true. My mother knelt then, pressing the dish towel to my face. "Sweetheart, please. Let's not make a scene. We can fix this. Fix this." The words sounded like poison. I tried to sit up, but the world tilted. My good hand slipped in the blood on the tile. My mother caught my arm. "Stay still. You'll only make it worse." Her hands were shaking, but her voice carried that same old insistence that peace mattered more than truth. My father stood adjusting his tie as if nothing had happened. "I'll talk to him," he said. "He's under a lot of pressure." Then he left the room. My mother followed a moment later, leaving me alone in the dim kitchen. The light flickered once, twice, then steadied. I could hear Ryan's footsteps pacing upstairs, his voice muffled through the ceiling, arguing with ghosts. I pressed my left hand to my shoulder, teeth clenched against the pane, and dragged myself toward the doorway. Each movement sent lightning through my arm. The walls seemed to close in the air, thick and sour. I reached the hall, the smell of smoke from blown-out candles following me. The last thing I remember was the cool floor against my cheek and the faint sound of my mother crying somewhere in the house. Then, everything went dark. The first thing I felt was the light. Harsh, white, unrelenting. The kind that hums and flickers and makes you question if you are awake or still dreaming. Then came the smell of antiseptic, sharp and clean, like the memory of every night shift I had ever worked. I blinked slow and heavy, realizing I was in the ER, but this time I wasn't the nurse. I was the patient. My arm was bound in a sling, my face-swollen lips cracked. A monitor beeped steadily beside me, each sound too loud in the quiet. My throat was dry when I whispered, "Where am I?" And a familiar voice answered softly, "You're safe, Emily. You're at Portland General." I turned my head and saw Dr. Evan Miles, my colleague from trauma rotation, standing by my bed. His expression was calm, but his eyes, those steady eyes I had seen through countless emergencies, held something different this time. Anger. "What happened?" he asked gently, though I could tell he already knew. My voice broke. "My brother." Evan exhaled through his nose, the kind of breath that carries disappointment instead of surprise. "Did you file a report?" I shook my head weakly. "My parents, they told me not to." His jaw tightened. "Of course they did." He wrote something on the chart, then met my gaze again. "Emily, you know the law. We have to document this." I closed my eyes. "Please, I don't want to make things worse." For who he asked. The silence that followed was heavy enough to crush air. The curtain rustled. My mother entered her perfume, a mix of lilies and guilt. "Oh, thank God," she said, forcing a trembling smile. "You're awake." My father followed, looking uncomfortable in the hospital light, his tie slightly crooked. Evan stepped aside, but didn't leave. "We're handling her care," he said flatly. "She needs rest." "Thank you, doctor," my father replied, his tone clipped. "We'll take it from here." Evan didn't move. "This is a criminal assault," he said. "Your daughter needs to be protected." My father's eyes went cold. "We'll handle it privately." My mother nodded quickly. "Ryan is devastated. He's been crying all night." I stared at them stunned. "He attacked me." My mother's lip trembled. "He didn't mean it. He was drunk. You know how he gets." "Yes," I said bitterly. "I do." My father leaned forward, lowering his voice like this was a business deal. "Emily, listen to me. Ryan is already in trouble with his job. If this goes public, it could destroy him. You don't want that, do you?" I wanted to scream, but the pain in my ribs made every breath shallow. "He destroyed me," I said instead. "You'll heal," he replied, as if that solved everything. Evan finally spoke, his voice steady but edged. Mr. Blake, your daughter's shoulder is dislocated and her face required 8 stitches. She's lucky she didn't suffer a concussion. That's not something you handle privately. My father glared. We appreciate your concern, doctor, but this is a family matter. Evan crossed his arms. No, sir. It's not. It's a crime. My mother stepped between them, eyes pleading. Please, can we not do this here? Evan looked at me. Emily, do you want me to call the police? I hesitated. My father's gaze burned into me, a warning older than words. I looked down at my hands, the IV taped to my skin. No, I whispered. Evan's shoulders sank, but he said nothing. My father nodded, satisfied. Good girl, he said. They left soon after, murmuring something about checking on Ryan. The door closed behind them, leaving only the hum of machines. Evan stayed silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer. You know they're protecting him, not you. I nodded weakly. That's how it's always been? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Emily, I've seen a lot in this job, but this... He stopped. You need to understand, silence doesn't keep you safe. It just keeps him powerful. His words settled like stones in my chest. I turned my head away, staring at the curtain where my parents had disappeared. For years, I had mistaken their control for love. But now, lying there broken and bruised, I saw it clearly. Love didn't demand silence. Control did. Evan adjusted my sling gently, his hands careful. You're going to be okay, he said, but please don't let them bury this. When he left, I was alone again with the beeping machines and the distant shuffle of hospital life. I caught my reflection in the dark screen of the monitor, one side of my face swollen bruised purple, the other pale and still, a stranger and myself all at once. I thought about every patient I had ever comforted, telling them, "You're safe now." I had said it so easily, but I had never believed it for me. My father's words echoed in my head. Don't break the family. My mother's, you should have known when to stop. And Evan's silence doesn't keep you safe. I closed my eyes and whispered to no one. Then what does? The monitor beeped steady and unbothered, indifferent to truth. Somewhere down the hall, a code alarm sounded and the staff rushed past. I lay still, my hand resting over the bandage on my shoulder, and realized that for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like a healer. I felt like a wound that had finally learned to speak. Evan didn't wait long. When my parents left the hospital that night, he stepped out into the hallway and made a call. I didn't know it then, but by the time the sun came up, a detective from the Portland Police Department was already on her way. The next morning, I woke to the sound of soft voices outside my curtain. She's stable, Evan was saying, but she's not safe if they take her home. We'll handle it, came a woman's voice, steady, firm. When the curtain opened, I saw her badge first. Detective Carla Hayes, late 40s, sharp eyes that had seen too much and still cared anyway. She introduced herself quietly, pulling a chair beside my bed. Emily Blake. She said, her tone gentle but direct. I'm sorry this happened to you. Dr. Miles contacted us. I'd like to ask a few questions if you're ready. I froze, my pulse speeding up. He called the police. He did, she said simply, because you deserve to be protected. I looked away. My parents won't see it that way. They don't have to, she said. You're an adult. You get to choose what happens next. I stared at my hands, at the faint tremor I couldn't control. If I report this, it'll destroy what's left of my family. Carla tilted her head. Emily, from what I understand, your brother already did that. All you'd be doing is telling the truth. Her words were quiet, but cut like a scalpel clean, deep necessary. I didn't answer. She opened a file folder. I've got your medical report here. Dislocated shoulder contusions to the face, multiple bruises on the ribs, glass lacerations to the palm. This is enough for an arrest. I winced. He didn't mean to... My voice cracked before I could finish. Carla leaned forward. That's what they all say, but intent doesn't erase harm. Tears stung my eyes. You don't understand. My father will blame me. He'll say I'm trying to ruin Ryan's life. And what about yours? She asked softly. Does it matter less? For a long moment, the only sound was the monitor beeping between us. I swallowed hard. "What happens if I sign?" "He'll be arrested," she said. "There will be a hearing, likely a restraining order. You'll be protected. It won't be easy, but it will be real." I thought about my father's voice telling me not to call, about my mother's trembling hands, about Ryan's face twisted in rage. And I thought about the towel soaked with my blood that she'd tried to hide. If I don't, Carla's gaze was steady. Then nothing changes. He goes home, sobers up, and you wait for the next time. Because there's always a next time. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. My hand trembled as I reached for the pen she placed in front of me. The form felt cold beneath my fingers. I hesitated, staring at the blank signature line. "If you don't speak," she said softly. "He wins twice." I signed. The pen shook, but the ink didn't. Carla nodded once, collected the papers, and stood. "We'll take care of it." True to her word, within hours, 2 patrol cars pulled up outside my parents' house. Ryan was still asleep when they came in. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains as officers led him out in handcuffs, his hair disheveled, still wearing last night's shirt. Mom screamed at the officers. Dad followed them to the driveway, shouting something about family matters and misunderstandings. But the cameras caught it. The local paper ran the photo the next morning. Local firefighter's son arrested in domestic assault. The comments on Facebook were ruthless. Some called it justice, others called it shame. In Portland, gossip spreads faster than news. By the time I checked my phone, my inbox was full texts from coworkers, missed calls from Mom, one from Dad, that simply said, "Unbelievable." I deleted them all. Evan came by my room later that day. He didn't say much, just sat in the chair beside me and handed me a coffee. "You did the right thing," he said. "It doesn't feel like it. It will." A few hours later, my parents arrived at the hospital again, their faces pale and hard. The air seemed to change when they entered. "Emily," my mother started, her voice shaking. "How could you?" They came to the house. The neighbors saw. My father stood behind her, arms crossed, eyes burning. "You humiliated your brother. You humiliated us." "He broke my shoulder," I said quietly. "He attacked me in front of you, and you had him arrested." My father snapped. "Do you realize what this will do to his career?" "What about mine?" I said louder now. "What about the fact that I can't even lift my arm to treat patients?" My mother's tears came fast. "He's sick, Emily. He needs help. He needs consequences," I said coldly. My father took a step forward, voice low but dangerous. "You always had a way of making this family look bad. You just made sure everyone in town knows it now." "Good," I said. "Maybe now they'll stop pretending everything's perfect." The look he gave me then was worse than anger. It was disappointment, the weapon he'd used my whole life. "You've lost this family," he said quietly. I met his stare without flinching. Maybe I finally found myself. He turned and walked out. My mother lingered for a moment, tears streaking her makeup. "You've shamed us," she whispered. "You've broken your father's heart." "He broke mine first," I said. She left. The door clicked shut. The room felt lighter. That evening, the hospital TV played the local news story again. I watched Ryan's mugshot flash on the screen, the caption reading, "Portland man charged with felony assault." I didn't cry. I didn't smile either. I just breathed deep and even for the first time in years. When Carla returned the next day, she told me Ryan had been released on bail but was forbidden from contacting me. "He'll hate that," I said quietly. "Good," she replied. "Let him sit with it." Before she left, she placed her card on the tray beside me. "You're stronger than you think. Most people never get this far." That night, alone in my hospital bed, I scrolled through social media. The photo of Ryan in cuffs had gone viral in our small community. Some of his old friends defended him, saying he was a good guy who made a mistake. Others weren't so kind. A nurse I barely knew messaged me, "I saw the news." What you did was brave. Brave. The word didn't fit yet, but I wanted it to. I stared at my reflection in the dark window. My face was bruised, but my eyes looked clear for the first time. Somewhere deep inside, I felt the faintest pulse of something new, Not joy, not relief, but defiance. I picked up my phone and wrote in my notes app, "Shame is their weapon. Truth is mine." It wasn't a statement of victory. It was a promise. By Monday morning, the whole town knew. Portland wasn't big enough to keep secrets, especially ones wrapped in family names and old reputations. The local news had run the story twice over the weekend, and by then, everyone in the neighborhood had something to say. The headline was short but brutal. ER nurse files assault charges against brother. The photo beneath it showed Ryan's arrest face, half-shadowed mouth open mid-protest. To most people, it was just gossip, another scandal to discuss over coffee, but to me, it was oxygen. Proof that silence had finally cracked. Still, when I returned home to my apartment that Monday afternoon, the weight of judgment followed like a shadow. My phone buzzed non-stop, unknown numbers, voicemails, messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years. I played one by mistake, Emily. It's Carol from church. "I just want you to know, we're praying for your family. This must be so hard for your parents. Not a word about me." I deleted it, then shut the phone off completely. At the hospital, whispers traveled faster than the call lights. By the time I returned to work a few days later, I could feel the shift in the air. Colleagues avoided my eyes in the hallway. The few who dared to approach kept their voices low, full of sympathy that sounded more like curiosity. "You're so brave," one nurse said. "If it were my brother, I don't know what I'd do." "You did the right thing," another whispered, then quickly added. "But still, your poor parents." Their pity felt heavier than silence. I tried to focus on my patients, on the rhythm of vitals and charts, but even the monitors seemed to pulse in judgment. One night during a late shift, an elderly patient reached for my hand. "I saw the news," she said softly. Her voice was cracked but clear. "You did the right thing, dear. My sister never pressed charges and she paid for it her whole life." I squeezed her hand, gently blinking back tears. "Thank you," I said. That was the first time I heard the words and almost believed them. Outside the hospital, the whispers were louder. At the grocery store, people glanced and turned away. A cashier I'd known for years asked too casually, "How's your brother doing?" On my way to the parking lot, I overheard two women near the produce aisle. "It's such a shame," one said. "He was such a good boy." "I heard she provoked him." "Well," the other replied, "some women just know how to push men's buttons." I froze mid-step, the world narrowing to the sound of their voices. For a second, I wanted to confront them, to make them see what they were really saying. Instead, I walked out the paper bag of groceries trembling in my hands. That night, scrolling through Facebook, I saw that Ryan's friends had started posting vague messages. "Real family doesn't betray you. One mistake doesn't define a man." My mother had liked two of them. My father hadn't posted anything, but he didn't have to. His silence was its own statement. Then there were the private messages. Some from old classmates offering support. Others uglier, saying things like, "You ruined your brother's life for attention." One even read, "If you cared about family, you'd have kept it quiet." I didn't reply to any of them, but I read every word. Each comment was another reminder of why so many people stayed silent. Justice demanded you speak, but the world punished you for the echo. A week after the story broke, I stopped by a small cafe on my day off. I just wanted coffee, a corner of normalcy. But as I stood in line, I heard my name whispered behind me. "That's her," a man said quietly. "The nurse who turned in her brother." I turned slightly, and our eyes met. He looked away, fast embarrassed, as if my gaze might infect him with discomfort. When I sat down, I saw a notification flash on my phone, a Facebook comment from someone named Linda Moore, one of Mom's bridge friends. It read, "Heartbreaking. Some wounds don't heal, especially when caused by family." Underneath it, my mother had replied with a heart emoji. My chest tightened. I closed the app. Later that afternoon, Detective Hayes called. "Just checking in," she said. "Trial prep's underway. You doing okay?" I hesitated. "Depends on your definition of okay." She chuckled softly. "That's fair. For what it's worth, people talk because they're uncomfortable with truth." "Doesn't make them right. It makes them louder," I said. "Louder fades," she replied. "Truth doesn't." After we hung up, I sat on the balcony with my coffee watching rain smear the lights of the city. Across the street, a mother walked her daughter home from school. The girl laughed, holding a bright yellow umbrella. For a moment, I wondered if she'd grow up believing family always meant safety. I hoped someone would teach her better. That night, Evan stopped by after his shift. He brought takeout in quiet company. We didn't talk about the case at first. We just ate in silence until he finally said I heard about the neighborhood chatter. "They'll forget eventually," I said, though I didn't believe it. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. "You know what the difference is between shame and truth? What shame lives off secrets. Truth survives exposure." His words lingered long after he left. I opened my journal that night and wrote, "They whisper because they fear being seen. I whisper because I'm learning to speak." 2 days later, I had to stop by my parents' house to pick up some old documents for the insurance hearing. The house looked the same, neat lawn white shutters, a flag hanging by the porch. But when I stepped inside, the air felt different, hollowed out. My mother sat at the kitchen table staring at the wall. "Your father's not home," she said without looking at me. "He can't bear to see you." I nodded. I didn't come for comfort. I reached for the envelope on the counter. She finally turned her face drawn and pale. "You've ruined everything," she whispered. "Ryan's friends won't speak to us. The neighbors avoid us. Are you happy now?" "Happy," I repeated. "No, Mom. But I'm free." Her eyes filled with tears. "Free. You call this freedom? You'll regret it when you're alone." I held her gaze. "I've been alone for years. The only difference is now I know why." She didn't answer. I walked out the rain, starting to fall again, soft and relentless. By the time I reached the car, I realized I wasn't crying, just breathing, and it felt like something close to peace. That night, I wrote in my journal again, "Shame is their weapon. Truth is mine." The next morning, someone slipped a note under my apartment door. It was written in neat cursive on floral stationery. I recognized the handwriting immediately. My mother's. It said, "Please stop. You've made your point. Come home." I folded it, placed it in a drawer, and never replied. Because for the first time in my life, I finally understood I didn't need to go back to be whole. The world could whisper all it wanted. I wasn't listening anymore. The courthouse smelled like disinfectant and nerves, that sterile blend of paper fear and polished wood that every victim eventually memorizes. When I walked through the metal detector, the officer nodded at me, maybe recognizing me from the news, maybe just seeing another name on the docket. My heart thudded like a drum in my ribs. The case was set for 10 a.m. Courtroom 4, assault in the second degree. Defendant Ryan Blake. Victim Emily Blake. Family present. I had spent the night before rehearsing what I would say, but no amount of preparation could slow the tremor in my hands. Evan came with me, his quiet presence a kind of armor. "You don't have to be perfect," he said as we walked down the corridor. "You just have to tell the truth." Truth, I thought, had always been my rebellion. Inside the courtroom buzzed with low voices. Reporters sat near the back, their notepads ready. My parents were already there, sitting on Ryan's side. Mom clutched a tissue. Dad's face was stone. Ryan sat between them, his hair trimmed, wearing a suit that didn't fit right. He looked smaller than I remembered, but his eyes still carried that flicker of arrogance that once disguised itself as charm. When he glanced at me, something cold passed through the air, like the echo of every unspoken apology that would never come. The judge entered, and the room rose. "State of Maine versus Ryan Blake," the clerk announced. My throat tightened at the sound of his name beside mine. The prosecutor, a woman named Lisa Harmon, stood first. "Your Honor, this case concerns a violent assault resulting in a dislocated shoulder, facial injuries, and emotional trauma. The evidence will show that the defendant attacked his sister in front of witnesses and that the family attempted to suppress the incident." Ryan's defense attorney, a polished man with too much confidence, rose smoothly. "Your Honor, my client deeply regrets the altercation. This was not an assault, but a family argument gone too far. Alcohol was involved. He has since sought counseling and takes full responsibility." Responsibility! The word twisted like irony. Lisa called the first witness, Detective Hayes. She testified about the medical records that seen the arrest. Her voice was steady, professional, unshakable. Then she held up a printed copy of the 911 transcript. The call was placed by Dr. Evan Miles, she said. He reported that the victim was severely injured and that her parents discouraged medical reporting. The judge nodded, taking notes. When Evan took the stand, my heart raced. His testimony was simple factual, but his eyes met mine once, just once, and that was enough to keep me grounded. I've seen hundreds of domestic cases, he told the courtroom, but I've never seen a victim apologize for being attacked as fast as Emily did. The defense tried to undermine him. You have a personal relationship with the victim, do you not? Professional, he replied firmly. And human, a few people in the gallery murmured. Then it was my turn. I walked to the stand, Palm's slick pulse roaring in my ears. Sworn in, I sat down and looked straight ahead. Lisa's voice softened. Emily, can you tell the court what happened that night? I told them everything. The turkey dinner, the glass breaking the silence, the blows. The words came slow at first, then faster, tumbling, like they'd been waiting years. My voice cracked once when I said, he hit me, and they told me not to call for help. The courtroom was silent. Even Ryan didn't move. What did your father say to you at the hospital? Lisa asked. I swallowed hard. He said, you should have stayed quiet. My mother began to cry softly. Dad put his hand on her arm, but didn't look at me. The defense attorney rose for cross-examination. Emily, he said smoothly, is it possible that you provoked your brother? Words exchanged. Perhaps I stared at him, disbelief curling hot in my chest. Provoked him. With what my existence? He cleared his throat, uncomfortable. You've described tension in your family. Would you say you've always felt misunderstood? Misunderstood doesn't break bones, I said evenly. A quiet ripple went through the gallery. The judge gave a warning glance, but even she looked faintly moved. The defense shifted tactics. You love your brother, don't you? I did, I said. But love isn't loyalty when it costs your safety. The words came out sharper than I planned, but I didn't take them back. When I stepped down from the stand, my knees felt weak, but something inside me felt clean. Ryan never looked at me. When it was his turn, he leaned into the microphone voice, low, trembling just enough to sound rehearsed. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't mean to hurt her. I was drunk. It was a mistake. The prosecutor tilted her head. A mistake is spilling wine, Mr. Blake. You broke her shoulder. He blinked rapidly, eyes darting to my parents. She said things. I snapped. My stomach turned. Even now he blamed me. Lisa folded her arms. Do you often hit people when they say things? He stammered. No, it was out of character. Then, perhaps, she said coolly, this is the character we should judge. The defense tried to salvage his image, painting him as a man under pressure, a good son who made one error. They submitted letters from neighbors and a pastor, every paragraph a plea for forgiveness. But none of them had been there that night. None of them had seen the blood. The closing arguments came swiftly. Lisa's voice carried through the quiet room. Silence is the abuser's oldest accomplice. Emily Blake broke that silence not for revenge, but for survival. The court must show that truth has weight even when it falls against family. When the judge called for recess, I stepped outside for air. The courthouse steps were lined with journalists' microphones flashing like insects. I ignored them all. The sky was gray, heavy with rain. Evan found me by the bench near the fountain. You did it, he said. You told the truth. So did a lot of people, I said softly. But now it's written down. Inside, as the judge returned, I took my seat again. The verdict wasn't that day, it would come later, but the decision in my heart had already been made. I glanced at my parents one last time. My mother's face was streaked with tears, her eyes full of something between love and resentment. My father stared forward, unmoving. When the session adjourned, I stood. Ryan looked up briefly, his lips parting like he might speak, but no words came. For the first time, I didn't wait for them to follow me. I walked out of that courtroom on my own, the sound of my heels echoing down the marble hall. Each step felt like reclaiming something I hadn't realized I'd lost. Outside, the rain finally broke, washing the air clean. I tilted my face up to it, breathing deep. letting the cold sting remind me I was still here, still whole, and finally heard. The sentencing came 3 weeks later in the same courtroom that still smelled faintly of disinfectant and varnished wood. I sat in the second row this time, hands folded in my lap, every nerve taut but steady. The gallery was half full. Neighbors, reporters, a few familiar faces from town, pretending they were there for civic duty, not gossip. Ryan sat at the defendant's table in a crisp navy suit, hair combed, face pale. His lawyer whispered in his ear while he kept his eyes down. My parents were behind him again, my mother clutching her rosary like faith could rewrite evidence. My father's stare was fixed forward, unreadable. The judge entered and silence fell. State of Maine versus Ryan Blake. The clerk said again the same words that had split our family open. The judge cleared her throat. We are here for sentencing. The defendant has entered a plea of guilty to assault in the second degree. Both sides may make final statements before the sentence is pronounced. The prosecutor stood first. Your Honor. This was not a spontaneous argument. This was a pattern of intimidation culminating in physical violence. The victim's injuries are severe and lasting. She suffers chronic pain in her shoulder, and the psychological effects are ongoing. The state recommends a sentence of 6 years with 2 suspended. She sat down. Ryan's attorney rose next, all smooth tone and polished phrases. Your Honor, my client has expressed deep remorse. He has voluntarily entered anger management, sought counseling, and maintained employment since his release on bail. We ask for leniency. This is a family tragedy, not a criminal intent. The words stung because they were half true and entirely wrong. Ryan stood then, turning slightly toward me. I'm sorry, he said, voice shaking. I was drunk. I made a mistake. I didn't mean to hurt you. I've lost everything already. My job, my family's respect. Please don't take my freedom too. He looked at the judge, not me. I wanted to feel something, anger, forgiveness, anything, but all I felt was a kind of stillness, the exhaustion of finally reaching the end of a long, cruel storm. The judge adjusted her glasses and spoke. Mr. Blake, alcohol does not cause violence. It exposes it. This court does not excuse the breaking of bones with the breaking of boundaries. She paused, her voice clear. You are hereby sentenced to 6 years in state prison with 1 year suspended, 5 years to serve, and 3 years probation. You are prohibited from contacting the victim directly or indirectly. My mother gasped, clutching my father's arm. My father lowered his head, his lips moving like he was praying, though I doubted he still believed in anything. Ryan's face went blank. For once, he didn't speak. The gavel struck once, and it was over. As the bailiff let him out, he turned his head, slightly, eyes meeting mine for a split second. There was no apology there, no understanding, just the dull realization that he had finally lost control. When the courtroom emptied, I stayed seated. Evan approached, resting a hand on my shoulder. You okay? I nodded slowly. It doesn't feel like victory, just quiet. Quiet's a good start, he said. Outside, the air was crisp, the first hints of autumn cutting through the humidity. The courthouse steps were damp from morning rain. Reporters clustered nearby, microphones flashing. One of them called out, Emily, any comment for the record? I stopped, looked at her, and said calmly, Silence cost me enough. I don't owe it anymore. Then I walked past. The story aired that night on every local channel. Portland nurse speaks out after brother's sentencing. They played a brief clip of my testimony, my voice steady but strained. The anchor called it a powerful stand against domestic silence. I didn't watch the rest. Instead, I sat in my apartment, lights off the city humming outside. My phone buzzed with messages from people I hadn't heard from in years, some kind, others dripping with condescension disguised as sympathy. So brave, so tragic. Hope you can forgive him someday. Forgive him. The word felt foreign, like a language I no longer spoke. I opened my laptop, found a photo of me and Ryan as kids, me missing a tooth, him holding a baseball glove. We looked happy, or maybe we just didn't know better yet. I stared at it for a long time, then dragged it to the recycle bin. Delete. The next day, the story hit Facebook again. Comment sections filled with arguments, strangers debating our lives like they were fiction. She should have kept it in the family. Good for her. More women need to speak up. He just needs help. She just wanted attention. Every line a reflection of the same sickness, how people romanticized silence because it kept their own houses quiet. I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I met with Carla Hayes at the precinct to sign the final paperwork. You did good, she said as she handed me the restraining order. You've given others permission to speak. I smiled faintly. It doesn't feel heroic. It never does, she said. Not until you see who follows. That weekend, my father showed up at my apartment unannounced. He stood in the doorway, hat in hand, shoulders slumped in a way I had never seen. Your mother wanted to come, he said, but she couldn't. Because she still blames me, because she doesn't know how to look at you, he said quietly. He hesitated before continuing. I came to say, I'm sorry. I stared at him, waiting for the rest. I should have stopped him that night. I should have protected you. His voice cracked. But I didn't. I failed you. The words hit harder than I expected. For a moment, I saw the man who taught me to ride a bike, who used to tuck me in with stories about honor and duty. Why now, I asked. He looked down. Because I saw the photos, the bruises. I thought I could control everything, but I was just protecting the wrong child. My throat tightened. I didn't need protecting Dad. I just needed you to see me. He nodded, eyes glistening. I see you now. When he left, I sat for a long time, the silence finally feeling clean instead of suffocating. That evening, Evan took me to dinner at a quiet place by the harbor. The sky was streaked with pink and gold, the water calm. So, what now, he asked. Now I start over, I said. No family, no ghosts, no pretending. He smiled gently. And what about forgiveness? I took a sip of wine, watching the sun sink. Forgiveness isn't freedom, I said. Truth is. After dinner, we walked along the pier. I could hear seagulls and the faint hum of a guitar from a street performer. For the first time in months, I felt my body unclench. The pain in my shoulder lingered, but it had become part of me, like a scar that didn't vanish but no longer hurt to touch. When we reached the end of the pier, I turned to Evan. You know what the worst part of silence is, I said. It makes you believe pain is private, that if no one sees it, it isn't real. But the truth is, it grows in the dark. He nodded, his hand brushing mine. And now, I said quietly, I keep the lights on. That night, I wrote one final entry in my journal. They said silence was love. They were wrong. Silence was survival. But truth is living. I closed the notebook and set it on the table beside my bed. For the first time in my life, I slept through the night without dreaming of the kitchen floor. The seasons changed quietly that year. Autumn bled into winter, and by the time snow started falling across Portland, my life had settled into something I didn't recognize calm. Not the brittle calm of silence, but the kind that grows after you've burned everything false. I moved to a smaller apartment near the harbor one with peeling paint and sunlight that poured through wide windows. I bought secondhand furniture mismatched and warm, the kind that didn't remind me of anyone else. At first, the quiet unnerved me. There were no voices rising in the next room, no footsteps pacing, no need to measure my words to keep peace. The first night, I woke to my own heartbeat and mistook it for danger. But slowly, I learned to breathe again. I returned to work full-time this time, not in the ER, but in a new wing, a trauma recovery center that specialized in victims of domestic violence. Evan had recommended me to the director, and on my first day, she said, "Your experience will save lives." I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that. The patients came in like ghosts, women, men, sometimes teenagers, each carrying the same hollow quiet I once wore. I recognized it instantly. I became the kind of nurse who listened more than she spoke. Sometimes when a patient flinched at a sound or whispered, "It was my fault," I would take their hand and say, "No, it wasn't. And you're not alone." Those words became a kind of medicine. One afternoon, months after the sentencing, I received a letter from the state correctional facility. My name was written neatly on the envelope. I didn't have to open it to know who it was from. I sat at the table for nearly an hour before finally tearing it open. The handwriting was messy, but familiar. Emily, it began. I've had a lot of time to think. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even know if I deserve it. I remember that night every day. I hate myself for it. I'm in counseling. I'm sober. I wish I could undo what I did. There were lines about childhood, about pressure, about being the disappointment. Then near the end, one sentence stood out. You were always stronger than me, and I hated you for it. But I see now that you were just trying to survive me. I read it twice, then folded it and placed it back in the envelope. I didn't write back. Forgiveness. I decided wasn't always something you gave away. Sometimes it was just the decision to stop letting someone live rent-free in your head. My mother called once around Christmas. Her voice was softer than I remembered, fragile. Your father's been quiet lately, she said. He watches the news and says nothing. We put up the tree. That's good, I said. How are you? Different, she said after a long pause. The neighbors still talk, but less now. Some of them even asked how you were doing. And what did you tell them, that you're stronger than anyone I know? It took me a moment to answer. Thank you. Emily, she said hesitantly. Ryan wrote us too. He asked if we could visit together when he's eligible. You can visit him, I said. I won't. He wants to apologize. He already did, I replied. The rest is his work to do. She didn't argue. Maybe for the first time she understood that my boundaries weren't rebellion, they were recovery. When I hung up, I didn't feel guilt. I felt relief. The new year came quietly. The city streets glistened with salt and snowmelt. I started running in the mornings again, the cold air cutting my lungs clean. I bought a plant I couldn't name and kept it alive just to prove to myself I could. Evan and I saw each other often, sometimes for dinner, sometimes just to walk along the harbor in silence. One night, he brought a small box. It's not a rescue mission, he said, smiling softly. Inside was a silver ring, simple. No diamond, no flourish, just solid metal, like truth. You don't need saving, he said, echoing words he'd once told me. But I'd like to stand next to your strength. For the first time in years, my heart didn't race from fear. It raced from something gentler. I said yes. We married in spring on a quiet bluff overlooking Casco Bay. There were no grand speeches, no family crowd, just us, Carla Hayes, as our witness and the sound of gulls cutting across the water. Afterward, we walked along the sand, shoes in hand. Do you ever think about them? Evan asked. My family, I said, sometimes, but not like before. They're a chapter I read until the end. He smiled. And now I'm writing my own. That summer, the hospital asked me to speak at a conference for trauma care providers. The topic, breaking the cycle of silence. Standing on that stage looking out at hundreds of faces, I remembered the kitchen floor, the beeping monitor, the courtroom. I thought my voice might shake, but it didn't. When I first became a nurse, I said I thought healing was about fixing what was broken. I was wrong. Healing is about teaching people they never needed permission to exist whole. Silence protects the abuser. Truth heals the soul. When the session ended, a woman in her 60s approached me, tears in her eyes. My daughter went through something like you, she said. She never pressed charges. I wish she had met someone like you sooner. I smiled, touched her arm, and said, You still can be that person for her. That night as I drove home, the sunset spread gold across the horizon, the kind of light that makes the world look forgiven. I pulled over by the water and just sat there listening to waves against the rocks. I realized peace isn't loud. It doesn't arrive like a sunrise. It sneaks in quietly, piece by piece, until one day you wake up and realize the air no longer tastes like fear. A few months later, I launched a small workshop series called Silent No More. It started as a community group in the hospital basement, but word spread quickly. Survivors came from towns I'd never heard of. Some brought photos, others just tears. We sat in circles sharing stories that hurt to tell but healed to release. On the wall, I hung a small sign that said, The truth will not apologize. It became our motto. Every meeting ended the same way, everyone writing one word they wanted to reclaim. Mine was peace. On the anniversary of my brother's sentencing, I drove alone to the rocky shoreline north of town. The air was sharp with salt, the tide pulling hard against the stones. I brought no flowers, no notes, just myself. I stood there for a long time, remembering the girl who once lay bleeding on a kitchen floor, waiting for someone to save her. I whispered into the wind, "You did it." Not to Ryan, not to my parents, to me. As the waves crashed and the gulls cried overhead, I realized the past wasn't a prison anymore. It was proof of survival, and survival, I finally understood, was the purest form of victory. It happened almost a year to the day since that night in my parents' kitchen. I sat at my desk in the staff lounge of the Trauma Recovery Center, the hum of fluorescent lights above me, and finished typing the final words of an article the hospital had invited me to write. The title read, "When Silence Breaks, Why Speaking Hurts But Heals." I wrote about the weight of staying quiet, about how families protect appearances instead of people, and about how truth doesn't destroy, it disinfects. I added one line near the end that felt like a pulse of everything I had lived through. Silence protects the abuser. Truth saves the soul. When I clicked publish, the piece went live on the hospital's blog. I closed my laptop, exhaled, and didn't think about it again until 2 days later when my inbox overflowed. Messages poured in from nurses, teachers, mothers, and strangers from other states. Some told me they had left abusive marriages after decades. Some just said thank you for naming what they had never dared to. A retired police officer wrote, "I wish my sister had someone like you before it was too late." I sat there reading, tears welling, realizing that my pain had become something larger than me. It had become permission for others to speak. One evening as I left work, I found my father waiting outside near the parking lot, hands deep in his coat pockets. The sky was bruised purple with dusk. "You wrote that article," he said, not a question. "I did," I replied. "Your mother read it too." I braced myself, but his voice stayed calm. "We're proud of you." The words hung in the cold air, fragile but real. He looked older, his posture softer. "We went to see Ryan last month," he continued. "He asked about you." I said nothing. "He's doing better," my father added. "Working in the prison workshop, sober for over a year." I nodded slowly. "Good," I said. "He should build something." My father studied me, then said quietly, "He told us he finally understands what he did, and that you were right to speak." That sentence landed like a stone sinking deep into still water. It didn't erase anything, but it rippled through the parts of me that had long stopped expecting peace. "I'm glad," I said simply. Before he left, he touched my shoulder, the one that had once been dislocated, and said, "You saved more than yourself, Emily. You saved us too, even if we were too blind to see it." When he walked away, the wind off the harbor carried the faint smell of salt and rain. I looked up at the darkening sky and whispered to no one. Maybe that's enough. Life moved on quietly after that. The workshop grew. Survivors became mentors. The sign on the wall, "The Truth Will Not Apologize," became our anthem. I began partnering with local police departments to train officers on trauma response, working side by side with Detective Carla Hayes, who once took my statement when I was still bleeding and afraid. Sometimes after a session, she'd nudge me and say, "Full circle, huh?" And I'd smile because it was. Evan and I spent weekends by the coast, hiking trails that smelled of pine and salt. Our fingers intertwined our silences comfortable. On one of those walks, I told him about the latest batch of letters from readers. "They keep thanking me," I said. "But I didn't save them. They saved themselves." He smiled. "Maybe, but someone has to show them it's possible." That night, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset behind the lighthouse, he said softly, "Do you ever regret telling the truth?" I thought about the courtroom, the headlines, the whispers that had followed me for months. "Never," I said. Truth hurt me once. Silence almost killed me. The following spring, the hospital invited me to give a closing talk at their annual memorial for victims of domestic violence. The auditorium was full family survivor staff. A photo wall lined the back faces of those who hadn't made it out. When I stepped to the podium, the room went still. I once believed family meant forgiveness at any cost, I began, but I've learned that forgiveness without accountability is just permission for harm. The people we protect by staying silent are never the ones who need protection. I paused, scanning the audience, meeting the eyes of women who looked like they were holding their breath. "Justice doesn't always roar," I said. "Sometimes it whispers." Sometimes it's a woman standing up in a quiet courtroom saying, "He did this." Sometimes it's just surviving and choosing to build again. The applause came slow at first, then grew into something thunderous, not for me, but for the truth itself. That night, as I walked home through the cool Maine air, I passed a cafe window and saw my reflection scar faint above my brow, eyes clear. For a long moment, I studied that face and realized I didn't look like a victim anymore. I looked like someone who had earned her peace. The world around me was ordinary again, the hum of cars, the flicker of streetlights, the ocean's low hush in the distance. But inside that ordinary rhythm was the extraordinary quiet of justice, the kind that doesn't demand applause, only acknowledgement. When I reached home, I sat by the window, opened my journal, and wrote my final entry. Peace isn't forgetting, it's remembering without bleeding. Then I closed the book and smiled. The storm had passed, the truth had spoken, and the silence finally was mine to keep. If you've ever been told to stay quiet for the sake of peace, this is for you. Because peace built on silence isn't peace, it's paralysis. I spent years believing that keeping the family together was more important than keeping myself alive. And maybe you did too. Maybe you grew up in a house where voices rose, but nobody ever said the truth out loud. Maybe you learned to smile through bruises, emotional or otherwise, because love was supposed to hurt sometimes. That's what they told us, right? That loyalty meant swallowing pain until it tasted normal. But here's what I learned in the hardest way possible. Silence doesn't heal anyone. It feeds the disease. Every time you stay quiet to protect someone else's comfort, you teach them that your suffering is acceptable. Every time you're told, "Don't ruin the family," what they really mean is, "Don't expose the cracks." And when you finally speak, they'll call you cruel for doing what truth should have done long ago, set you free. I've been there. I've seen the look in a parent's eyes when they choose shame over justice. I've heard the excuses, "He didn't mean it. He's under stress." You're making it worse. But pain doesn't need a translation. It speaks clearly even when no one listens. So, if you've ever stood in a hospital hallway, a courtroom, or an empty bedroom wondering if you should have just stayed silent, hear me. Now you did the right thing. You survived. You chose truth. And survival is never betrayal. To anyone watching this who still lives in fear of speaking up, don't wait for the people who hurt you to give you permission. They never will. Speak anyway. Write it. Record it. Tell a friend. Call the hotline. Walk into the police station. Do whatever it takes to reclaim your voice, because silence only protects the guilty. The truth doesn't destroy families, it reveals which ones were real. And if your family turns their back on you for telling it, then it wasn't a family, it was a cage. The ones who love you will find you in the light. They'll stand next to you when the noise dies down, and you'll realize you never needed a crowd to validate your story, just courage to live it. If you've ever had to choose between loyalty and your own safety comment, I choose truth. Let your words stand as proof that silence has met its match. And if you believe that real strength isn't how quietly you endure, but how bravely you speak, hit like and subscribe. Because there are still people out there watching this right now who need to know that breaking the silence isn't destruction, it's deliverance. You are not what happened to you. You are what you do next. Tell your story. We're listening.